Jamal Washington's body slammed against the cold mall tiles, security guard's knee pressing into his spine. Through blurred vision, he saw dark suits approaching. FBI, stand down. As badges flashed, the mall cops froze. Jamal's trembling fingers clutched his FBI internship letter. The truth would finally come to light. Before I dive into this incredible story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about justice prevailing against all odds. The moment those FBI agents stepped in changed everything for this young man. But how did he end up on that mall floor in the first place? Let's find out. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Jamal Washington's alarm blared through his small bedroom. Unlike most mornings when the 17-year-old would hit snooze at least twice today, Jamal sprung up with excitement. His eyes immediately darted to his desk, where the letter lay crisp, official, and life-changing. The FBI Youth Leadership Program had accepted him one of only 20 students nationwide. "Grandma, you up?" Jamal called out as he hurried to the bathroom, letter in hand, as if he needed to confirm once more that it wasn't a dream. Elaine Washington was already in the kitchen, the aroma of her famous buttermilk pancakes filling their modest two-bedroom home. At 68, she moved more slowly than she once did, but her mind remained sharp as a tack, especially when it came to her grandson. "Been up since 5, baby. Today's your big day," she said, sliding a plate across the counter as Jamal entered. "You eat before you do anything else." Their home sat in Pine Heights, a predominantly black neighborhood, with well-maintained but aging houses. Through the kitchen window, Jamal could see Mrs. Jenkins watering her prize roses next door, the same routine for 15 years. The familiarity of Pine Heights stood in stark contrast to where he planned to go today. Westlake Mall, the upscale shopping center across town in the predominantly white part of the city. "I need to look professional," Grandma Jamal explained, spreading the letter on the table away from the syrup. "The orientation's tomorrow, and I don't have anything proper to wear." Elaine's face showed pride mingled with concern. "Your daddy's suit in the closet is from 1998, Jamal finished with a laugh. "I'd look like I'm playing dress-up." Elaine sat across from him, her hands wrapping around her coffee mug. "Jamal, we need to talk about where you're going." Jamal recognized that tone. It was the same one she'd used years ago when giving him what she called the talk. Not about birds and bees, but about being a young black man in America. About keeping his hands visible, speaking respectfully to authorities, not making sudden movements. "Grandma, I know what you're going to say," he said gently. "But things are different now. Look," he tapped the FBI letterhead. "They chose me. Me, out of thousands of applicants. That has to mean something's changing, right?" Elaine reached across to squeeze his hand. "Baby, I'm so proud of you. So proud it hurts. But a letter doesn't change how some folks see our skin. Westlake Mall isn't like the shops here. Those security guards." "I'll be careful," Jamal promised. "Debate team captain, remember, I know how to talk to people." His phone buzzed with a text from Andre, his best friend since kindergarten. "Andre, congrats again, genius. Still can't believe you're going to be working with the feds." "Jamma, not quite working. It's a program for high school students." "Andre, whatever man, it's the FBI." "You sure about hitting up Westlake alone, though, Jamal?" "It's just a mall, bro." "Andre, a mall where people who look like us get followed around like criminals." "Jamal, I'll be fine. Need to look the part for orientation. Andre, at least take your letter with you. Might need to prove you belong there." Jamal stared at the last message. The suggestion stung, but he knew Andre meant well. After a moment's hesitation, he carefully folded the acceptance letter and slipped it into his backpack. "I'm taking the bus to Westlake," he announced, rising from the table. "Should be back by dinner." Elaine nodded slowly. "You call me when you get there and when you're leaving." And Jamal, her voice softened. "I'm so proud of you. Your mama and daddy would be too." Jamal hugged his grandmother, the woman who had raised him since he was 8 when his parents died in a car accident. Her strength had become his foundation, her wisdom his guide. Today felt like a step toward making all her sacrifices worthwhile. "Love you, Grandma," he said, shouldering his backpack. The acceptance letter sat inside a shield he hoped he wouldn't need. Richard Keller squinted at the bank of monitors in Westlake Mall's security office, his coffee growing cold beside the keyboard. At 48, with a paunch that had replaced the muscular physique of his younger days, Keller still carried himself with the rigid posture of his former profession. 15 years on the police force had ended 3 years ago with what his termination papers called excessive force during a routine traffic stop, what Keller called doing my damn job. Wilson Taylor, he barked at the 2 new security guards watching the screens beside him. "Pay attention, this is where the real education happens." Taylor, a skinny white kid barely out of high school, nodded eagerly. Wilson, older and more reserved, kept his eyes on the screens. "What exactly are we looking for?" Sir Taylor asked, leaning forward. Keller took a swig of his bitter coffee. "Suspicious behavior. Groups of teens without shopping bags. People wearing heavy clothes in warm weather. Backpacks." He paused. "And let's be real. Certain demographics have higher rates of shoplifting. That's not prejudice. That's statistics." Wilson shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. The morning crowd filtered through Westlake Mall's gleaming entrance. Polished marble floors reflected the upscale stores that catered to the city's affluent, predominantly white population. The security team watched as mothers with designer handbags guided children toward the play area, business professionals grabbed coffee, and retirees began their daily mall walking routine. "Hold up," Keller said, suddenly pointing at monitor 3. "There, entrance B." The camera showed a young black man in jeans and a navy hoodie entering the mall. A backpack hung from his shoulders. "What about him?" Wilson asked. "Doesn't fit the demographic," Keller replied. Heading toward the high-end stores, "Keep an eye on him." On screen, Jamal Washington walked confidently through the mall, checking store directories as he sought out Bernard's, the mall's most expensive men's clothing store. Unaware of the security team's scrutiny, he moved with purpose, excitement about tomorrow's orientation overriding his grandmother's cautionary words. "He's going into Bernard's," Taylor reported. "Should we follow?" "Wait," Keller instructed. "Let's see what he does. Wilson, take the floor and maintain visual. Taylor, stay on cameras." Wilson nodded and left the office, hand instinctively checking his radio. Inside, Bernard's Jamal felt immediately out of place. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and displays featured suits with price tags that made his heart sink. Still, he reminded himself this was an investment in his future. He had saved nearly all the money from his scholarship stipend for exactly this purpose. A sales assistant named Sarah, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, watched Jamal from behind a counter. When he approached a rack of blazers, she reluctantly moved in his direction. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she doubted he could afford anything in the store. "I need a suit," Jamal replied confidently. "Something professional for an orientation tomorrow." Sarah's eyebrow arched slightly. "Our suits start at $800. Jamal nodded. "I understand. I'd like to try some on, please." "What kind of orientation?" Sarah asked, not moving toward the suits. "It's for the FBI Youth Leadership Program," Jamal answered, unable to keep the pride from his voice. Sarah's expression shifted subtly. "The FBI program? I read about that in the paper. Very competitive." "Yes, ma'am. Only 20 students selected nationally." Something in Sarah's demeanor changed. Not completely, but enough that she now guided him toward the suits more appropriate for his age and build. The Navy would be traditional for law enforcement, she suggested. Or the charcoal gray for versatility. Outside the store, Wilson maintained his position by a kiosk, radio in hand. Subject still in Bernard's looking at suits, he reported to Keller. In the security office, Keller watched the cameras with increasing suspicion. "He's probably casing the place," he muttered. "No way he's actually shopping there." Taylor, eager to impress, nodded in agreement. "Want me to join Wilson, sir?" "Yeah," Keller decided. "Both of you stay close. When he leaves, I want to know if he's carrying anything he didn't pay for." Meanwhile, Jamal tried on a navy suit that transformed his appearance from teenager to young professional. Looking in the mirror, he stood taller, imagining tomorrow's orientation, the start of a career path he dreamed of since watching FBI agents speak at his middle school career day. This is the one, he told Sarah, who was now being attentive, if not exactly warm. At the register, Jamal carefully counted out the money he'd saved, feeling both pride and nervousness at spending so much at once. Sarah wrapped his purchase carefully, placing it in a Bernard's shopping bag with tissue paper. "Good luck at your orientation," she said, handing him the receipt. "Thank you," Jamal replied with a genuine smile, unaware that his departure from the store was being monitored by 3 separate security personnel, all convinced he had done something wrong. Jamal stepped out of Bernard's with the shopping bag in one hand, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. The suit had cost more than he'd initially budgeted, but the quality was undeniable. He could already imagine the impressed looks from the FBI agents tomorrow when he arrived dressed like someone who belonged in their world. His phone buzzed with a text from his grandmother. "You okay? Did you find something nice?" As Jamal pulled out his phone to respond, he noticed 2 security guards who had been lingering near the storefront suddenly straighten up and exchange glances. A prickle of unease ran down his spine. His grandmother's warnings echoed in his mind. Pretending not to notice, Jamal typed a quick reply. "All good. Got perfect suit. Heading home soon." He slipped the phone into his pocket and continued walking toward the mall exit, maintaining a casual pace despite his growing discomfort. Taylor and Wilson followed at a distance, speaking into their radios. Jamal could feel their eyes on his back. He quickened his pace slightly, hoping to reach the main exit before any confrontation occurred. "Sir Mall Security, we need you to stop for a moment." Jamal's heart sank. He paused, remembering everything his grandmother had taught him about these situations. Slowly, he turned around, keeping his hands visible at his sides, the Bernard's shopping bag dangling from his fingers. "Yes, officers," he asked, his debate team training helping him maintain a calm, respectful tone despite the adrenaline surging through his body. Wilson and Taylor approached, positioning themselves to block any potential escape route. "We need to check your bag, sir," Wilson stated. "May I ask why?" Jamal inquired, struggling to keep his voice steady. "I just purchased this suit." He lifted the Bernard's bag slightly. "Standard procedure," Taylor replied, his hand resting near his belt. "We've had reports of shoplifting today." Jamal knew this wasn't true. He also knew arguing would only escalate the situation. "I have my receipt, right here," he said, slowly reaching toward his pocket. "Keep your hands where we can see them," Taylor snapped, his voice rising. By now, shoppers had begun to notice the confrontation. Some stopped to watch, others hurried past with averted eyes. None intervened. "I'm just getting my receipt," Jamal explained, his hands trembling slightly as he carefully extracted the paper from his pocket and held it out. Wilson took the receipt and examined it with exaggerated scrutiny, while Taylor kept his eyes fixed on Jamal. "What's in the backpack?" Taylor demanded. "Just my wallet, bus pass, and some paperwork," Jamal answered. "I can show you." Before Wilson could respond, Richard Keller approached, his security chief badge prominently displayed. "What's the situation here?" he asked, though his tone suggested he'd already made up his mind about what was happening. "Customer claims he purchased a suit," Wilson reported, still holding the receipt. Keller took the receipt, glanced at it dismissively, then addressed Jamal directly. "Open the backpack, son." The word son made Jamal's jaw tighten, but he complied slowly, removing his backpack and unzipping it. "Everything I have is mine," he stated firmly. "We'll be the judge of that," Keller replied, gesturing for Taylor to search the bag. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Jamal could feel their stares, the weight of their assumptions. To them, he wasn't a scholarship student with an FBI acceptance letter. He was just another black kid being questioned by security, presumed guilty. As Taylor rummaged through his backpack, Jamal spotted his FBI acceptance letter and felt a surge of hope. "In the front pocket, there's a letter that explains who I am." "Sure there is," Keller muttered sarcastically. Taylor pulled out the letter, but before he could unfold it, Keller snatched it away. "Sir, that's my acceptance letter to the FBI Youth Leadership Program. I'm starting tomorrow," Jamal explained, desperation creeping into his voice. Keller scoffed. "Kid, do you really expect us to believe that the FBI doesn't recruit from—" He caught himself, but his meaning was clear. From where Jamal challenged anger, finally breaking through his careful composure. "From my neighborhood. Or from people who look like me." Something in Keller's expression hardened. "Don't get smart with me, boy." "I'm not your boy," Jamal responded, straightening his shoulders. "I'm a selected candidate for a federal program, and I'd like my letter back, please." The crowd had grown larger. Someone was recording with their phone. "That's it," Keller decided, motioning to his guards. "Detain him for attempted theft and disorderly conduct." "What?" No, Jamal protested as Wilson grabbed his arm. "I paid for everything. Check with the store." But Keller was already speaking into his radio, requesting the mall's detainment room be prepared. Panicked Jamal tried to step back to explain himself again. That slight movement was all the justification Taylor needed. "He's resisting," Taylor shouted, and in an instant both guards tackled Jamal to the ground. His face hit the cold mall tiles with stunning force. Pain exploded across his cheek and forehead. Wilson's knee pressed into his spine while Taylor twisted his arms behind his back. "I didn't do anything," Jamal gasped, tasting blood from where his lip had split against the floor. The Bernard shopping bag had torn open, his new suit spilling out onto the polished mall floor. The FBI letter had fallen nearby, partially unfolded, the official letterhead visible to anyone who might actually look. As handcuffs bit into his wrists, Jamal felt hot tears of rage and humiliation threatening to spill. Everything his grandmother had warned him about was happening, and his achievements, his acceptance letter, his carefully saved money, none of it had protected him. Through blurred vision, Jamal noticed something unexpected. Several people in dark suits were approaching from the direction of the mall cafe. They moved with purpose, their expressions grim, hands reaching inside their jackets. Special Agent Isaiah Brooks was enjoying his third cup of coffee in the Westlake Mall food court. At 42, the veteran FBI agent had learned that good coffee was essential during long days of interviews. Around him sat 9 other agents from the Bureau's Diversity Recruitment Task Force, all taking a well-deserved break after a morning of interviewing candidates for the Youth Leadership Program. "Tomorrow's orientation should be interesting," remarked Agent Tanya Rodriguez, scrolling through applicant profiles on her tablet. "This year's class is exceptional." That Washington kid Brooks nodded appreciatively. Perfect Scores debate champion, and his essay on community policing reform was published in a law journal at 17. "He's on your mentorship roster, right?" asked Rodriguez. Brooks nodded, a rare smile crossing his usually stern features. "Reminds me of myself at that age, determined to change the system from within." Their conversation halted as commotion erupted near the main corridor. Brooks' attention shifted to a growing crowd about 50 yards away. Years of training had taught him to recognize the signs of escalating conflict, and something in the scene immediately triggered his instincts. "Something's happening," he said, standing for a better view. What he saw made his blood run cold. A young black man was being tackled to the ground by mall security guards. As the teenager's face turned toward them, Brooks recognized him instantly from his application photo. "That's Jamal Washington," he said sharply. "Already moving?" "Our top candidate?" Without hesitation, the team of FBI agents moved in unison toward the scene, their break forgotten. As they approached, Brooks could hear Jamal protesting his innocence, while a security chief stood over him with unmistakable contempt. Federal Bureau of Investigation Brooks announced loudly as they converged on the scene. "Everyone stand down immediately." The mall security team froze confusion, replacing their aggressive posturing. The Chief Keller, according to his nameplate, looked up with disbelief. "Step away from the young man," Brooks ordered, his voice carrying the full authority of his position as he displayed his badge. "Now, this is mall business." Keller responded, though uncertainty had crept into his tone. "We have a shoplifting suspect." "No, what you have," Brooks replied coldly, "is a federal intern being assaulted on public property." Around them, the 9 other agents had strategically positioned themselves in a perimeter, each displaying FBI credentials. The crowd of shoppers watched in stunned silence, several still recording the scene on their phones. That's not possible," Keller stammered, glancing down at Jamal and then back at the agents. "He's just a kid." "That kid is Jamal Washington, selected candidate for the FBI Youth Leadership Program and expected at orientation tomorrow morning," Brooks stated, nodding toward the letter that had fallen on the floor. "Unless you're planning to explain to the special agent in charge why one of our recruits has been injured under your watch, I suggest you release him immediately." The security guards looked to Keller for direction, their confidence visibly shaken. "How do I know you're really?" FBI Keller challenged a last desperate attempt to maintain control. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward, her patience clearly exhausted. "Would you like to see our badges again, or would you prefer we continue this conversation downtown at our field office? Your choice. What do you think? Should these mall security guards face consequences for their actions? Comment 1 if you believe they should be held accountable, or 2 if you think they were just doing their job. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories about justice and accountability. The tension in the air was palpable as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Would the mall security back down and face the consequences of their actions? Would Jamal recover from this traumatic experience? And how would this incident affect his future with the FBI program he'd worked so hard to join? Stay tuned as we continue this incredible true story. The mall security office, typically a bastion of Keller's authority, had transformed into an impromptu FBI command post. Jamal sat in a chair, holding an ice pack to his swollen cheekbone, while a paramedic checked his wrists where the handcuffs had left angry red marks. Special Agent Brooks leaned against the wall, his eyes never leaving Keller, who fidgeted uncomfortably in his own desk chair. The other agents had dispersed, some handling the crowd outside, others reviewing security footage, 2 standing guard at the door. "The cuts won't need stitches," the paramedic informed Jamal, applying a butterfly bandage to his split lip. "But you'll have bruising for at least a week. I recommend you follow up with your doctor." Jamal nodded, wincing at the pain that shot through his jaw. The physical injuries hurt, but they paled compared to the humiliation he'd experienced. People had watched him being tackled, had recorded it, had assumed he was guilty of something simply because of who he was. "Thank you," Agent Brooks told the paramedic, who packed up his kit and left. Once the door closed, Brooks pulled a chair beside Jamal. "I want to apologize on behalf of the Bureau," he said, his voice low but clear. "What happened to you today is exactly what the Youth Leadership Program aims to address and change." "Not your fault," Jamal replied, his words slightly slurred from his swollen lip. Brooks glanced at Keller before continuing. "Your position in the program is secure. In fact, if you are still interested after this experience, I'd like to personally mentor you." Before Jamal could respond, the office door burst open. Eleanor Wright, the mall's general manager, hurried in her designer heels, clicking against the tile floor, followed by a man in an expensive suit whom she introduced as the mall's legal counsel. "This is an absolute disaster," Wright declared, surveying the room. Her gaze lingered on Jamal's injuries, and she had the decency to look disturbed. "On behalf of Westlake Mall, I want to extend our sincerest apologies for this unfortunate incident." "Unfortunate incident," Brooks repeated, his tone dangerously calm. "Miss Wright, your security chief profiled, falsely accused, and physically assaulted a minor who had done absolutely nothing wrong. We're prepared to offer compensation," the lawyer interjected smoothly. "Medical expenses, replacement of damaged property, and an additional sum for the inconvenience provided this matter is resolved privately." "Inconvenience?" Jamal spoke up, surprising everyone. Despite his injuries, his voice carried the confident articulation that had made him debate champion. "Is that what racial profiling and assault is called now?" The office door opened again, and Elaine Washington entered, her face a mask of controlled fury. Behind her followed Agent Rodriguez, who had called her per Jamal's request. Grandma Jamal began attempting to stand. Elaine rushed to him, gasping at the sight of his injuries. "Oh, baby." Her fingers hovered near his bruised face, afraid to touch and cause more pain. Then she turned to face the room, her spine straightening, 5 feet 2 inches of unwavering resolve. "Who's responsible for this?" she demanded, her gaze settling on Keller. Mrs. Washington, the lawyer, stepped forward with an outstretched hand. "We're deeply sorry about this misunderstanding and..." "Misunderstanding." Elaine cut him off, ignoring his hand. "My grandson was assaulted for shopping while black. There's no misunderstanding about that." Outside, the sounds of news vans arriving could be heard. The video had already gone viral, with FBI rescues black teen from mall cops trending on social media. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately," Wright suggested anxiously. "We're prepared to offer a very generous settlement." "We're not interested in hush money," Elaine replied firmly. "We're interested in accountability." Agent Brooks stood. "Mrs. Washington, Jamal, if you're ready to leave, I'd be happy to drive you home. Our team has collected statements and evidence, including the security footage." Keller, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "You can't seriously believe this was about race. We were responding to suspicious behavior. In my professional judgment..." "Your professional judgment got you fired from the police force 3 years ago," Brooks interrupted. "Yes, we looked you up, Mr. Keller. Your record of complaints for racial profiling made for interesting reading." Jamal collected his damaged suit and backpack, the FBI letter now safely tucked inside. Despite everything, a part of him felt validated. The system had failed him initially, but then representatives of that same system, the FBI agents, had stepped in. Perhaps change was possible after all. As they prepared to leave, the mall's lawyer made one last attempt. "Consider the settlement offer, Mrs. Washington. Going public or pursuing legal action would be a lengthy, stressful process for everyone." Elaine looked at Jamal silently, deferring to his decision. "I need time to think," Jamal said finally, his voice tired but resolute. The drive home was mostly silent. Jamal sat in the back of Agent Brooks's government-issued SUV, watching the scenery change from the affluent neighborhood surrounding Westlake Mall to the familiar streets of Pine Heights. The contrast had never seemed so stark. "Your friends are outside," Brooks noted as they approached the Washington home. A group of teenagers had gathered on the front lawn, including Andre, who stepped forward anxiously as the unfamiliar vehicle pulled up. "Word travels fast," Jamal commented, attempting a smile that turned into a wince. "In my experience," Brooks replied, "community is the best medicine for injustice." As Jamal stepped out of the car, his friends rushed forward, their expressions changing from concern to anger as they saw his injuries up close. "Man, they did this to you for buying a suit," Andre exclaimed, his fists clenching. "It's more complicated than that," Jamal replied, though part of him knew it was exactly that simple. That evening, as news vans parked on their street and Jamal's phone buzzed constantly with notifications about the viral video and messages of support, he sat on the porch with his grandmother. The hashtag number Justice for Jamal was trending nationwide. "What do you want to do?" baby Elaine asked softly, looking at her grandson's bruised face. Jamal thought about the FBI program, about Agent Brooks's offer to mentor him, about the system he had dreamed of changing from within. He thought about Keller and others like him who wielded authority as a weapon rather than a responsibility. "I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else," he answered finally. "I want accountability not just for me, but for everyone who doesn't have FBI agents coming to their rescue." Elaine nodded, unsurprised. She had raised him to stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. Especially then. "Whatever you decide," she said, taking his hand carefully to avoid the bruised wrist. "I'm with you all the way." Inside the house, Jamal's phone continued to buzz with messages of support, media requests, and the growing outcry for justice. Tomorrow would bring decisions and consequences, but for tonight, surrounded by the love of his family and community, Jamal allowed himself to rest. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains of Jamal's bedroom, illuminating the scene outside his window. 3 news vans had parked along their modest street, and reporters stood at the ready, hoping for a statement from the teenager whose encounter with mall security had captivated the nation overnight. Jamal checked his phone, wincing at both the pain in his wrist and the flood of notifications. The video of his takedown and subsequent FBI intervention had been viewed millions of times. His Instagram followers had increased from a few hundred to over 50,000. Strangers were sending messages of support, outrage, and inevitably hate. "You up, baby," Elaine called softly from the hallway. "Someone here to see you." Jamal pulled on a clean t-shirt and sweatpants, avoiding his reflection in the mirror. He'd caught a glimpse of his face the night before. Swollen lip, bruised cheek, a cut near his eyebrow, and had no desire to see it again. In the living room sat a woman he didn't recognize, dressed in a charcoal pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She rose when he entered, extending her hand. "Jamal Washington, I'm Lauren Rivera, FBI Internal Affairs. I'd like to ask you some questions about yesterday's incident if you're feeling up to it." Jamal shook her hand, surprised by her firm grip. "Internal Affairs? I thought Agent Brooks was handling everything." "Agent Brooks and his team were directly involved," Rivera explained, gesturing for him to sit. "Standard procedure requires an independent review when FBI personnel intervene in a civilian matter." Elaine brought in a tray of coffee and placed it on the table. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need me," she told Jamal, giving Rivera an appraising look before leaving. For the next hour, Rivera asked detailed questions about the incident, what Jamal had done in the mall, the security guards' exact words, how much force they had used. She recorded his answers and took photographs of his injuries. "Did you do anything that could have been interpreted as suspicious?" she asked, her tone neutral. Jamal thought carefully. "I reached for my phone to text my grandmother. Later, I tried to get my receipt out of my pocket. That's when they told me to keep my hands visible." Rivera nodded, making notes. "And at what point did you mention the FBI program?" "Almost immediately," Jamal replied. "I told them about the letter in my backpack, but they wouldn't look at it. The security chief, Keller, basically suggested I was lying." As their interview concluded, Rivera handed him her card. "If you remember anything else, call me directly. The Bureau takes this very seriously, Jamal." After she left, Jamal checked his phone again. Andre had texted multiple times. "Andre, you seen the news? You're everywhere, bro. Andre, CNN just showed the video. Andre, Principal Wallace called an assembly about what happened. Everyone's talking about it." Meanwhile, across town, the executive suite of Westlake Mall had transformed into a crisis management center. Eleanor Wright paced the conference room while the mall's parent company executives joined via video call. "The stock price is already down 3%, announced Bradford Collins, CEO of Meridian Properties, which owned Westlake and a dozen other upscale malls nationwide. This couldn't have come at a worse time with the shareholder meeting next week. We've drafted a statement expressing deep regret for the incident. Wright responded, sliding papers across the table. Our legal team recommends an immediate settlement offer to the Washington family. What about Keller? Asked Collins, his face stern on the video screen. Wright hesitated. Security Chief Keller has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. However, terminating him might be seen as an admission of liability. It might also be seen as the bare minimum of decency, retorted Diane Chen, Meridian's chief legal officer. Have you reviewed his personnel file? This isn't his first issue with racial profiling. The meeting continued as they debated damage control strategies, unaware that their security footage was already being analyzed frame by frame at the FBI field office. At Westview High School, Principal Wallace had indeed called a special assembly. Jamal's classmates and teachers watched in stunned silence as the viral video played on the auditorium screen, many gasping when they recognized their classmate on the ground. What happened to Jamal Washington yesterday was unacceptable, Wallace stated firmly after the video ended. It also wasn't an isolated incident. This is why we discuss systemic racism not as a historical concept, but as a present reality that affects members of our community every day. In the front row, Miss Harrington, Jamal's debate coach, wiped away tears. She had written one of his recommendation letters for the FBI program, highlighting his exceptional ability to remain calm under pressure and articulate complex ideas, clearly skills that may have saved his life when confronted by hostile authority figures. Back at the Washington home, Jamal's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Hello, Jamal. This is Desiree Montgomery, civil rights attorney. I was wondering if we could meet to discuss what happened to you at Westlake Mall. Before he could answer, another call beeped through Agent Brooks, checking on him and confirming tomorrow's rescheduled orientation. By late afternoon, Rivera had returned, this time with findings from her preliminary investigation. The mall's security footage corroborates your account completely, she informed Jamal and his grandmother. We've also reviewed Chief Keller's background. He has a history of complaints regarding racial profiling both at the mall and during his time as a police officer. So what happens now? Elaine asked, her hand resting protectively near Jamal's. That's partly up to you, Rivera replied. The Bureau will issue a formal statement supporting Jamal and condemning the security team's actions. We can also facilitate filing charges if that's what you want. Jamal considered this. What about the other people this has happened to? The ones without viral videos or FBI connections? Rivera's expression softened slightly. That's an excellent question, and it's why I brought this. She placed a file on the table. With your permission, we'd like to expand our investigation. Preliminary research suggests a pattern of discriminatory security practices at Westlake Mall going back several years. As Elaine examined the file, Jamal's phone buzzed with a text from Andre. Andre, yo, found something you need to see. Remember Tyrell from last year's debate tournament? Same thing happened to him at Westlake. No FBI rescue though. Coming over with screenshots. The pieces were falling into place. What had happened to Jamal wasn't an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. It was part of a pattern, one that had persisted because most victims didn't have the resources or platform to fight back. That evening, as Andre showed him social media posts from other young black men who had been profiled at Westlake Mall, Jamal made his decision. This wasn't just about his bruised face or damaged suit. It was about something much bigger. Something that his FBI program essay had addressed: the responsibility of institutions to serve and protect everyone equally. I want to go forward with this, he told Rivera when she called to check in. Not just for me, but for everyone who didn't have FBI agents stepping in to help them. I thought you might say that, she replied. The director wants to speak with you tomorrow after orientation. As night fell, FBI Director James Matthews reviewed the Rivera report in his Washington, D.C. office. The incident had caught national attention, putting the Bureau's new diversity initiatives under intense scrutiny. Matthews had already authorized an unprecedented public statement supporting Jamal and condemning the actions of the mall security team. "This young man just passed the toughest entrance interview we never intended to give him," he remarked to his chief of staff. "Schedule a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. I want to address this personally." In Pine Heights, Jamal finally slept his decision made. Tomorrow would bring his FBI orientation and the beginning of a fight for accountability that would extend far beyond his own experience. 1 week had passed since the incident at Westlake Mall, and Jamal Washington sat at his grandmother's kitchen table surrounded by an unlikely gathering. To his right, Agent Isaiah Brooks represented the FBI's continuing support. Across from him sat Desiree Montgomery, the civil rights attorney whose reputation for taking on systemic discrimination had earned her both admirers and powerful enemies. His grandmother moved quietly around them, refilling coffee cups and occasionally resting a protective hand on Jamal's shoulder. The mall's settlement offer increased again this morning, Montgomery stated, sliding a document across the table. $500,000 plus a public apology and diversity training for their security staff. Jamal glanced at the figure but didn't reach for the paper. The past 7 days had been a whirlwind from his FBI orientation, attended with still visible injuries that no one pretended not to notice, to media interviews, community rallies, and meetings with lawyers. The hashtag number, Justice for Jamal, had evolved into a broader movement, highlighting similar incidents nationwide. "That's a lot of money," he acknowledged quietly. "It could pay for my entire college education, help Grandma fix the roof." "It's hush money," Elaine said firmly from the stove. "They're not sorry about what they did. They're sorry they got caught on video." Montgomery nodded. "Your grandmother's instincts are good. The settlement includes a non-disclosure agreement. You wouldn't be able to discuss the incident publicly." Which means Brooks added all those other young men who've come forward with similar experiences would lose the momentum your case has created. The decision weighed heavily on Jamal. Since the video had gone viral, dozens of people had shared their own stories of being profiled at Westlake and other Meridian Properties malls. Most disturbingly, Jamal had discovered that the security company employed by Westlake had financial ties to private prison corporations, a detail uncovered by Andre, who had become his unofficial research assistant. "The community meeting at church last night," Jamal began, "was inspiring. His grandmother finished for him. Pastor Williams said he's never seen so many people come together like that." The meeting had indeed been remarkable. Pine Heights Baptist Church had overflowed with residents from across the city, crossing both racial and economic lines. People who had never set foot in the neighborhood had come to express solidarity and share their own experiences with profiling. A knock at the door interrupted them. Andre entered carrying his laptop. "You need to see this," he announced without preamble, opening the computer on the table. "Just found it this morning." On screen was a spreadsheet showing Westlake Mall's security incident reports for the past 3 years broken down by race. "How did you get this?" Brooks asked, professional concern evident in his tone. Legally, Andre assured him, "My cousin works in mall administration. She's been sending me documents through official whistleblower channels." The numbers were stark. Black shoppers, who made up only 12% of Westlake's customer base according to marketing data, accounted for 67% of security stops and 78% of detainments. "This isn't just about me anymore," Jamal said, looking up from the screen. "It never was." Montgomery closed her portfolio. "If you decide not to settle, I'm prepared to file a class action lawsuit on behalf of you and others who've experienced similar treatment. It won't be easy or quick, but it could force real systemic change." "What about your position with the FBI program?" Elaine asked, concern etching her features. "Would a lawsuit jeopardize that?" Brooks shook his head. "Quite the opposite. The director has been clear. The Bureau stands with Jamal." In fact, he hesitated, then continued. I wasn't going to share this yet, but he's authorized me to offer Jamal a special assignment within the program, focusing on community law enforcement relations. Working with the Civil Rights Division, Jamal asked interest, peaking despite his exhaustion. Directly, Brooks confirmed, "Your experience, unfortunately, makes you uniquely qualified." As their discussion continued, Jamal's phone buzzed with a news alert. Keller had been fired from Westlake Mall but was already being considered for another security position at a different company. "They fired him to save face," Jamal said, showing the others his phone. "But nothing systemic has changed. He'll just do the same thing somewhere else." That evening, after everyone had left, Jamal and his grandmother sat on their front porch swing watching the sunset. The neighborhood felt different now. Reporters had mostly moved on to other stories, but community members still stopped by, regularly offering support and sharing their own experiences. "What are you thinking, baby?" Elaine asked softly. Jamal was quiet for a long moment. "I keep thinking about all the people this has happened to. People without viral videos or FBI connections. If I take the settlement, what message does that send?" Elaine nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You know your grandfather marched with Dr. King in Selma. He always said the hardest part wasn't facing the dogs or the fire hoses. It was waking up the next morning and continuing to fight, knowing how long the road would be." "I never knew that," Jamal said, surprised. "His grandfather had died before he was born." "Some stories you save until they're needed," Elaine replied. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But remember, this fight didn't start with you, and it won't end with you either. The question is what part you want to play in it." Later that night, Jamal lay awake, his mind racing. The settlement would solve his immediate problems, secure his future. The lawsuit would be years of scrutiny, possibly affecting his college applications, his career prospects. There was no guaranteed outcome. He reached for his phone and reread the latest messages from people who had been profiled at the mall. One in particular caught his attention, a 13-year-old boy who had been handcuffed in front of his mother for looking suspicious while buying her a birthday present. At dawn, Jamal made his call to Montgomery. "I want to go forward with the lawsuit," he told her. "Not just for me, but for everyone this has happened to, and everyone it might happen to in the future if nothing changes." "It won't be easy," she warned, though he could hear approval in her voice. "The right path usually isn't," he replied, echoing words his grandmother had often told him. By mid-morning, Jamal's decision was public. The mall's settlement offer was rejected. Montgomery announced the class action lawsuit against both Westlake Mall and its parent company Meridian Properties, citing a pattern of discriminatory security practices. At FBI headquarters, Director Matthews nodded with approval as he read the news. "Get Agent Brooks on the phone," he instructed his assistant. "Tell him Operation Transparency is a go." That young man just passed another test he didn't know he was taking. 3 months after the incident at Westlake Mall, Jamal Washington strode confidently through the halls of the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, D.C. The FBI lanyard around his neck and windbreaker bearing the Bureau's insignia no longer felt strange or oversized. In the short time since joining the youth leadership program, he had grown into his role, and the Bureau had adapted to accommodate his unique position. Washington called Agent Rivera, waving him into a conference room. Perfect timing. Inside, Agent Brooks and Attorney Montgomery were reviewing documents spread across a large table. Since Jamal had decided to pursue the class action lawsuit while continuing with the FBI program, an unprecedented collaboration had formed between the Bureau's Civil Rights Division and Montgomery's law firm. "How was your flight?" Brooks asked, as Jamal took a seat. "First time in first class," Jamal admitted, with a small smile. "Hard to believe all this started with me getting tackled for buying a suit." The lightness of his tone belied the seriousness of their work. In the months since the lawsuit was filed, Montgomery had identified 47 additional plaintiffs who had experienced racial profiling at Meridian Properties malls across the country. The FBI, conducting its own parallel investigation into civil rights violations, had granted Jamal special access to their findings as part of his modified program curriculum. Meridian's lawyers requested another continuance. Montgomery informed him sliding over a legal document. Standard delay tactic. Meanwhile, I've received 3 more calls from their settlement team this week. Still trying to buy silence, Jamal asked, skimming the motion. With increasingly desperate numbers, she confirmed. They're particularly anxious to settle with you individually, to separate your case from the others. Jamal shook his head. Not happening. Brooks pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. We've identified a pattern across 17 malls in Meridian's portfolio. Security personnel were explicitly instructed to monitor certain demographics more closely. The screen displayed training materials with thinly veiled racist guidelines for identifying suspicious behavior. This is bigger than we initially thought, Rivera added. The company that provides security training to Meridian also contracts with 3 police departments and 5 private prison corporations. Jamal had spent the past 3 months diving into these connections, applying the investigative skills he was learning in the program to his own case. His access to FBI resources had revealed troubling links between seemingly separate entities. There's something else you should see, Brooks said, his expression grave, as he passed over a folder marked Confidential. This just came through official channels this morning. Inside was a memo detailing Meridian Properties' plan to silence critics through intimidation. Jamal's name appeared multiple times, along with strategies for damaging his reputation if he refused to settle. They're planning to use my application essay against me, Jamal noted, pointing to a highlighted section, claiming my criticism of law enforcement practices shows bias. They don't know the essay is part of why you were selected, Brooks replied with a tight smile. The Bureau values critical thinking, not blind loyalty. As their meeting continued, Jamal's phone buzzed with a text from Andre. Andra, man, you're trending again. Youth Leadership Conference speech went viral. 500K views and counting. The previous week, Jamal had addressed a national conference of high school student leaders, sharing his experience and the systemic issues it represented. The speech, delivered with the poised articulation that had made him debate champion, had resonated far beyond the immediate audience. We should discuss security for your grandmother while you're here in D.C., Rivera said, bringing him back to the present. The intimidation tactics might escalate. Jamal nodded concern, flashing across his features. She won't leave Pine Heights, but some neighbors have organized a community watch. Agent Brooks arranged for additional patrols too. Their work continued into the evening, reviewing depositions and preparing for Jamal's own testimony in the upcoming preliminary hearing. Despite the serious nature of their task, there was an energy in the room, the sense of machinery long stuck finally beginning to turn. Later in his hotel room, Jamal video called his grandmother, who was staying with her sister for added security. "How's Washington treating you, baby?" she asked, her face filling the screen. "It's intense," he admitted, "but I feel like we're making real progress. The FBI's civil rights team is taking this seriously." "I'm so proud of you," she said, her eyes shining. "Your grandfather would be too." The next morning brought the most challenging encounter yet. Meridian's executive team had requested a deposition preparation session, which would effectively be Jamal's first face-to-face meeting with those ultimately responsible for the policies that had led to his assault. In the conference room of a prestigious law firm, Jamal sat across from Bradford Collins, CEO of Meridian Properties, and Eleanor Wright, still managing Westlake Mall despite the controversy. Their legal team flanked them like an honor guard. Mr. Washington Collins began, his tone cordial but cold. "I want to personally express my regret for your experience at our property." "Regret isn't the same as responsibility," Jamal replied evenly, Montgomery's coaching evident in his measured response. "We've implemented new training procedures," Wright interjected. "And as you know, Mr. Keller was terminated immediately." Only to be hired by another security firm 2 weeks later, Jamal countered. The problem isn't just individual bad actors, Miss Wright. It's the system that enables and protects them. Collins leaned forward, his facade of politeness slipping slightly. You're a bright young man, Mr. Washington, with a promising future. This lawsuit could drag on for years, consuming time you could spend on your education, your career. The implied threat wasn't subtle. My education is going quite well, Jamal responded, straightening the FBI windbreaker he had deliberately worn to this meeting. As for my career, standing up against systemic injustice seems like an excellent start. Montgomery smoothly redirected the conversation to procedural matters, but the confrontational tone had been set. As the deposition prep concluded, Collins approached Jamal privately. You know, the CEO said quietly, we've discovered some interesting connections between civil rights lawsuits and our private prison investments. A curious conflict of interest, wouldn't you agree? Jamal met his gaze steadily. Curious indeed. Almost as interesting as the FBI's growing interest in corporate intimidation tactics. Collins's expression hardened, but before he could respond, Brooks appeared at Jamal's side, his FBI credentials prominently displayed. Ready to go, Washington? The agent asked casually. Director wants an update before the press conference. The mention of a press conference, whether real or fabricated, had the desired effect. Collins retreated his parting glance, promising this wasn't over. Outside, in the safety of their government vehicle, Jamal let out a long breath. He scared. He should be, Brooks confirmed. The evidence you've helped compile doesn't just support the lawsuit, it potentially points to criminal conspiracy. That evening, back at FBI headquarters, Jamal presented his findings to a joint task force of civil rights attorneys and federal agents. His journey from victim to investigator had transformed him, building upon his natural analytical abilities and powerful communication skills. The connection between Meridian's security policies and their prison investments creates a disturbing incentive structure, he explained, pointing to his carefully constructed flowchart. Their security stops feed directly into a system they profit from. As the presentation concluded, Director Matthews himself stepped into the room, a rare occurrence that signaled the importance of the case. Impressive work, Mr. Washington, Matthews said, reviewing the materials. When Agent Brooks proposed including you in this investigation, there were concerns about objectivity. You've proven those concerns unfounded. Thank you, sir, Jamal replied, the validation meaningful despite his exhaustion. The Bureau stands behind you, Matthews continued, both in your lawsuit and in your future with us should you choose that path after college. The implications weren't lost on Jamal. What had begun as a traumatic incident had potentially shaped his entire career trajectory. The system that had failed him initially was now offering him a chance to transform it from within. As the meeting dispersed, Jamal checked his phone to find dozens of messages from other young people sharing their own experiences of profiling and discrimination. His personal trauma had become a catalyst for a movement larger than himself. Tomorrow would bring his testimony in the preliminary hearing, the first official step in a legal battle that could take years. But tonight, looking out over the Washington Monument, illuminated against the night sky, Jamal felt something he hadn't experienced since that day on the mall floor. Hope that real change was possible. 1 year to the day after being tackled to the ground at Westlake Mall, Jamal Washington stood outside its gleaming entrance, heart pounding in his chest. The building had featured prominently in his nightmares for months, but today he was returning on his own terms, not as a victim, but as an agent of change. You ready for this? Agent Brooks asked, standing beside him in the parking lot. Jamal adjusted the collar of his suit, a different one than he'd purchased that fateful day, but chosen with the same care. As ready as I'll ever be. The class action lawsuit against Meridian Properties had settled 2 months earlier following the release of damning evidence that Jamal had helped uncover. The terms were unprecedented. substantial financial compensation for all plaintiffs, mandatory overhaul of security practices across all Meridian properties, and perhaps most significantly, the establishment of a $10 million foundation dedicated to addressing racial bias in private security. Jamal had used his portion of the settlement to create a scholarship fund for students from Pine Heights pursuing careers in law, criminal justice, or public policy. The first recipients had been selected last week, with Elaine Washington proudly serving on the selection committee. As they entered the mall, heads turned. Some recognized Jamal from the viral video and subsequent media coverage. Others noticed the FBI windbreaker Brooks wore, wondering what business brought federal agents to their shopping center. "The training room is this way," directed the new mall manager, a woman named Yasmin Chaudhry, who had been brought in specifically to implement the settlement-mandated reforms. Everyone's waiting. In the repurposed security office, the very room where Jamal had been treated for his injuries a year ago, 20 uniformed security officers sat attentively. Among them were several new hires, part of Meridian's commitment to diversifying their staff. "This is Jamal Washington," Chaudhry introduced. "As part of our new training protocol, Mr. Washington will be sharing his perspective on customer service and unbiased security practices." Jamal stepped forward, momentarily thrown by the surreal nature of addressing the security team that had once viewed people who looked like him as inherent threats. He spotted a familiar face in the back row, Officer Wilson, who had helped tackle him. The man's eyes dropped when their gazes met. "A year ago, I entered this mall to buy a suit." Jamal began, his voice steady. "I left in handcuffs, with injuries that took weeks to heal. The physical wounds have faded, but the memory remains, not just for me, but for everyone who saw that viral video and recognized that it could have been them, their son, their brother." The room was silent, some officers shifting uncomfortably. "I'm not here to shame anyone," Jamal continued. "I'm here because what happened to me wasn't just about individual actions. It was about a system that encouraged seeing certain people as threats based solely on their appearance. A system that can and must be changed." For the next hour, Jamal led the security team through scenarios and discussions, drawing on the training he'd received through his now permanent position with the FBI's Community Relations Initiative. As a college freshman majoring in criminal justice at Georgetown University, he balanced his studies with his role as a student ambassador for the Bureau's reform efforts. After the session, as officers filed out for their shifts, Wilson approached hesitantly. "I wanted to say," he began awkwardly, "what happened that day? I've thought about it a lot." "So have I," Jamal replied evenly. "I followed orders," Wilson said, though it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "But I should have questioned those orders. I'm sorry." Jamal studied the man, seeing not just an individual, but a component of a larger system. "The training you're receiving now, are you taking it seriously?" Wilson nodded. "Very. It's changed how I see things." "Then make it count," Jamal told him. "Not with an apology to me, but with how you treat the next person who looks like me that walks through those doors." As they prepared to leave, Jamal noticed a familiar figure in the mall's parking garage. Richard Keller, now working as an attendant after failing to secure another security position. The former security chief glanced up, recognizing Jamal in his tailored suit and FBI windbreaker, then quickly looked away. There was no confrontation, no dramatic showdown, just the quiet accountability of a man facing the consequences of his actions while Jamal moved forward with purpose. Back on campus that evening, Jamal attended a meeting of the Criminal Justice Reform Club he had founded. 20 students gathered to discuss upcoming initiatives, including a community forum on police community relations that would feature speakers from law enforcement, civil rights organizations, and directly impacted communities. The FBI director confirmed for next month's panel. Jamal announced to enthusiastic responses, and Attorney Montgomery will be joining as well. After the meeting, Andre, now Jamal's roommate and the club's vice president, pulled him aside. "Got a call today. That kid from Baltimore who reached out last week, his family wants to meet with us. Same situation as yours, tackled at a mall for suspicious behavior." Jamal nodded solemnly. "Set it up for tomorrow. I'll bring the bureau resources we discussed." Later that night, Elaine called as she did every evening. "How was the mall?" she asked. Concern evident, despite her attempt at casualness. Different, Jamal replied truthfully. "Still hard to walk through those doors, but important." "Your grandfather used to say that healing and justice go hand in hand," Elaine told him. "You can't have one without working toward the other." "I think I understand that now," Jamal said, looking at the framed photo on his desk, a picture of himself with Director Matthews at the FBI orientation ceremony they had rescheduled after his injuries healed. Beside it sat a newspaper clipping announcing the settlement and a handwritten note from Agent Brooks that simply read, "This is just the beginning." The next morning, Jamal stood before a lecture hall filled with criminal justice students and faculty members. As a freshman teaching assistant for the department's Ethics and Law Enforcement course, he offered a perspective few professors could provide. "The system isn't abstract," he explained, gesturing to the complex diagram on the screen behind him, the same one he had presented to the FBI task force. "It's made up of individuals making choices within structures that either encourage or discourage certain behaviors. Changing the system means addressing both." A student raised her hand. "But isn't it discouraging? You won your case, but these incidents keep happening." Jamal considered the question carefully. "A year ago, I was lying face down on a mall floor, wondering if things would ever change. Today, I'm helping implement new training programs for the same security team that tackled me. The FBI has incorporated my experience into their cadet training. 47 other people received justice through our collective action." He paused, looking out at the engaged faces before him. Change isn't a single victory. It's a series of transformations, institutional and personal. What happened to me was traumatic, but it also revealed my path forward. Not everyone has that opportunity. That's why those of us who do must use it to hold the door open for others. As the lecture concluded, Jamal checked his messages. Another case had been reported, another young person profiled and detained while simply living their life. The work continued, seemingly endless. But as he gathered his materials, Jamal no longer felt the crushing weight of injustice that had once threatened to overwhelm him. Instead, he felt purpose, a clear vision of the future he was helping to build. One case, one policy, one mind at a time. From victim to advocate, from student to teacher, from the cold mall floor to the halls of justice, Jamal Washington's journey had transformed not just his own life, but the system that had failed him. The path ahead remained long and challenging, but he no longer walked it alone. Jamal's story teaches us that systemic change requires both individual courage and collective action. When faced with injustice, the easiest path is often silence or private settlement, but meaningful transformation demands that someone stand up and say, "Enough." The FBI agents who intervened represented the system working as it should, but it was Jamal's decision to pursue accountability that created lasting impact. This narrative reminds us that institutions reflect the people within them. Keller's prejudice represented entrenched discrimination, while Agent Brooks demonstrated how those same systems can be redirected toward justice. True change happens at both levels simultaneously. Perhaps most importantly, Jamal's transformation from victim to advocate illustrates how traumatic experiences, when channeled constructively, can become powerful catalysts for social progress. His initial suffering wasn't erased, but it gained meaning through the reforms it sparked and the other victims it ultimately helped. The path to justice is rarely straight or easy, but those who walk it change not just their own stories, but the world around them. Has Jamal's journey inspired you to speak up against racism or discrimination you've witnessed? Would you have had the courage to decline a settlement and fight for systemic change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story about overcoming racism touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful racism stories that highlight important social issues. Share this video with someone who needs this message of perseverance in the face of discrimination. Thank you for watching these racism stories that remind us we all have the power to challenge injustice when we refuse to stay silent.